Mudball. Mudball! Oh, Mudball. 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 Mudball.
Welcome to the Mudball podcast. I'm back here with Owen and Enda. Thank you guys for being here. It's good to have you guys back. And today I want to talk to you guys about the game of golf and how it's grown so much over the last 2 decades and how so many people are playing the game. But it seems that so many of them are mixing the sport with alcohol, and this isn't seen in many other sports with the exception of softball. So I want to know what you guys thought this is doing for the game of golf today.
Yeah, look, I think as a social aspect, it's pretty interesting. I know from playing a lot of golf back in Europe, there's a real sense of the game is all about going out and enjoying it for 18 holes, and then you really enjoy yourself on the 19th hole by maybe having a pint or two of whatever type of beer, whatever drink people want to have, and then they'll get home, whatever, not promoting drink driving or anything like that, but they find a way of getting back. But that's the way it's set up back home, as most people walk or carry their bags. There's no carts, which is definitely very different to American culture. With America, I've seen exactly what you're talking about, Nate. I've seen a lot of guys talking about going out and drinking a certain amount of cans every hole, and it just seems like a completely different game completely, and it almost seems to lose the sense of why we go out there in the first place to play golf.
Because there's so many guys that are going out there and playing just to drink a beer hole.
Exactly, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, personally, I can't actually comment on it because I've never experienced it myself. I've always been someone who actually likes to really concentrate on their golf on the course and try and get the most out of every round and really enjoy it. But to me, enjoying golf is not through drinking out there and having that kind of being some of the focus. So that's just my own personal experience.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that go to this whole topic of alcohol. One is, we've just mentioned, is the players actually drinking on the golf course. I mean, that is a no-no, and it should be a no-no in every golf course. You don't come to a golf course to actually drink 5 cans of beer. And if a golf course is allowing that, they're undermining the very etiquette that they're meant to be proposing if a player follows in respecting the course and being able to enjoy the game for what it is. To your point, Owen, back to the 19th, being the pub afterwards or the bar afterwards, very common to have 2 or 3 pints, maybe 4 or 5 if somebody else is driving you home, to celebrate that sort of collegiality amongst the friends because of the joy you had on the golf course. But there should be no substitution for that. And golf, I would suggest, should be banning alcohol consumption on the course. It's not valuable to the golf course in terms of revenue. It's negligible in terms of revenue. But in terms of etiquette, in terms of, sometimes, I can't say I've seen it directly, but I'm sure at times when I've heard groups of players laughing or sort of joking loudly, in some cases, I'm sure there's been beer consumed where they're getting jovial about the game and not behaving as they possibly should be. For me, it should be banned, as for the players. The other side of that then is, of course, is amongst the fans, is sort of looking at its consumption as an ingredient of coming through the gate to celebrate 18 holes of golf whilst having a meal, going to the bar and going out to watch 5 holes, coming back to the bar. That's obviously a much bigger element regarding revenue for the tournament or the golf club itself, because they see that as part of the entertainment. But that also has got I would suggest, a limit to it, especially maybe as we will talk about, in hearing in some instances people roaring during a game and roaring at a player in the tee box as soon as the club has hit the ball, when you're just going, there's no need for that. That's not what golf is about. So I think that there's 2 questions there. One is much more in control of the golf management of the course that says no alcohol allowed. And the other is, how do we allow alcohol amongst the spectators?
Like alcohol on the course, I've had a significant rise of interactions with drunk players on the course, I think in the span of 2 years, ever since COVID hit. And it seems like game has been growing so much. So many people are just trying the sport out, and they're doing it with a beer in their hand. They're doing it with, probably a 6-pack. And it's honestly it's starting to annoy me because I see so many people in my home course that are just drunk. I see so many people sometimes even playing tournaments drunk, and it's it's not the game that's supposed to be.
Yeah, I totally get that, Nate. The whole tournament thing, that totally, I find that mind boggling completely. I mean, I thought the guys these days on tour were trying to emulate the real kind of fitness buzz that's going around the golf game, not the kind of John Daly style buzz that was going on a couple of years ago. But yeah, again, just as I alluded to earlier on in the podcast, being lucky enough to play a lot of golf back in Europe, it just seems like it's not as encouraged just as much. For example, as I said, by people walking, playing golf, or using kind of push carts, that doesn't encourage drinking out there the way kind of the taking the carts over in America does. Similarly, when it comes to the halfway houses back in Europe, there's not alcohol is not sold at the majority of halfway houses unless it's a very exclusive country club. Over here, it seems like the average place will sell cocktails and beers and literally after 9 holes, which seems like a very, it seems like clubs are almost encouraging drinking on the golf course, which I personally think needs to stop. And I think that's a huge factor towards the issue that we're discussing today.
Some of those players are actually just destroying the course because they're drunk. They have no clue what they're doing. They just throw clubs. And there's like videos online of drunk people driving carts like into a bunker or into a tree, and they're just doing stupid stuff just for the fun of it.
I totally agree. I mean, it may not be the same as, driving on a road with a car, kind of drink driving like that, but at the end of the day, they might not injure someone else out there, but they could certainly injure themselves and the club's property in the cart. So I totally get everything you're saying, and I think that something needs to be done about it for sure.
Yeah, again, I think it's back to the club management here. What's the enticement for them to be? Because I think there are clubs where there's no drinking allowed, period. And if you were seen drinking on it, you'd be kicked off the course within 5 minutes. I think we mentioned before this that it was suggested in some golf courses that the carts actually also the people that come around with the food on the carts sell alcohol as well. I just don't understand it. I mean, if I was a member of a club at the moment, it would be something I'd be saying, you need to stop here because this is not what I joined. So I don't know what the rules are as to who does it and who doesn't. I think the local clubs that we know here do it. I presume can I name clubs? I presume it's okay to name clubs. I presume Fairchild Wheeler does it. I don't know. I think they would allow it.
I'm pretty sure they do.
Great River allows it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure if Yale would allow it. Or the more prestigious clubs in terms of their heritage and their ownership. I'm not so sure. But I just personally think the membership should always strike that, the 19th hole is when we celebrate the round.
Well, like going back to like John Daly, like in the 90s, he was encouraging it, and it kind of went away during the 2000s, especially in Tiger's era. But now you turn on the TV and watch the professional tournaments. If you watch the Ryder Cup, they were shotgunning beers on the first hole, and it's the character that they're displaying, that the professional players are displaying. And I feel like it's encouraging alcohol for normal players.
Yeah, personally for me, I think the Ryder Cup, it highlighted a major shift in the way golf is viewed in that sense, because as you said, you're the likes of Justin Thomas shotgunning a beer on the first hole. Now, to me, that would almost undermine the opponent that you're playing against too, because look, I mean, Justin Thomas doesn't prepare to play a major championship by shotgunning a beer on the first hole, does he?
I mean, they did lose pretty bad.
They did, of course. But it was still very interesting. I mean, I think this year too, the antics from the American team afterwards really highlighted a shift, considering, a lot of them were there, drink in hand, particularly Xander Schauffele. I remember having the cigar in his mouth and looking like he was high, to be totally honest. I've never seen celebrations like that afterwards from a point of view. I mean, we've seen the champagne, that sort of stuff from many winning Ryder Cup teams, but not quite to the level of that the States went to this year. So I don't know. It was interesting. I think you're right. The shotgunning and stuff like that really doesn't set a good example for the whole golfing world. I suppose afterwards, the guys should be allowed to let loose, but maybe some of what was broadcast probably shouldn't have been shown, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's the important point there, because I think what happens on the 19th would never look good if it was let loose either.
Yes.
I think it's the social media. It's the guy with the iPhone pulling up the picture and showing someone in a disheveled state going, oh my God, why have you just done this? Because now everybody knows that I'm drunk or whatever. Whereas in the olden days, you didn't have the cameras going in, they were closed. You weren't allowed through the door. So I think it's a commodification of that sort of the Instagram, the Twitter, etc., sort of lifestyle feed that is somewhat showing a side that's shouldn't be public, and it shouldn't be demonstrated by what a lot of kids would look up to as sort of icons of the game in such a disheveled state. I mean, Justin Thomas, there's no excuse for that beer on the first tee. He should have been ashamed that he did that in representing his country as an example to younger children. Because, I mean, we're not going to touch on this one, but I'm also thinking of the issue of betting, which is now becoming predominant on the TV across all sports, including golf. I think that's shameful for either drinking or alcohol or betting to become commodified as a sort of a jovial comment when you have a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old looking and saying, I want to play this game, so these are the things I do. I think it's dishonorable, and it should be stopped. It should be stopped predominantly by the television stations that are taking the revenue from these betting companies, and stop intermittently, constantly referring to the odds on this where such and such, and if, oh my God, if I'd bet, I could have won a lot of money. But that's diversifying somewhat from the alcohol. But it's the same analogy. It's disrespecting the game to allow access to other variables that somewhat undermine its authenticity.
I want to ask you guys how you think this is going to affect the future of the game of golf. Because this is just happening right now, but this is going to affect the future generations that are going to be playing golf.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's going to affect in a couple of different ways. Obviously, you look at tournaments, particularly what we see online, like the Waste Management Phoenix Open this year. Like, I mean, what was going on there with the, all the beers being thrown from the France onto the green? I mean, I think that has to be certainly scaled back straight away. I mean, we understand that hole is amazing because it's an amphitheater. It's unlike any other hole in the game of golf. But the reality is, that can't be happening where we have 20 and 30-minute delays just to move beers off a green. So the reality is the PGA Tour are literally going to be forced into scaling that back, in my opinion, because that certainly can't get any more out of hand. With regards to the on-course stuff at the moment, personally, I think the guys who are committing these offences, the way you guys kind of see it, in terms of they're drinking on the course and certainly drinking a lot on the course, they haven't done anything, or there hasn't been major stories so far that has really, I think, made clubs say, right, we have to ban this. The more prestigious clubs that are letting it go for the moment. I think until an incident happens, maybe multiple incidents, a lot of them are still going to do nothing, in my opinion, and nothing's going to happen in that sense. But I think when it comes to fans, they're definitely going to be scaled backs for sure.
In my opinion, like, the golf clubs are definitely not going to do anything. It's their business, and it's just another way for them to make money. So they're not going to do anything about it. But it's going to affect the kinds of people that play golf. I think that it's not going to be the type of people that golf clubs want, especially exclusive golf clubs.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're right. It attracts a different type of clientele to the game that, certainly for the different reasons why myself and yourself and are playing the game, in terms of trying to be as good as we possibly can. I think, again, it all comes back to the social aspect, doesn't it? So it would be interesting to see what happens. I mean...
Yeah, I think this is part of the challenge, though, to some extent, is that, there's a lot of people who see golf as an elite sport with regard to the membership and the ownership of golf clubs. In other words, if you're not rich, you're not in, period. So I think one has to be careful about necessarily victimizing those that drink as in being sort of not becoming to play golf as against those sort of who don't want them to be there anyway because they're working class and they don't suit the image of the golf course. I think the golf courses can easily stop this. It just takes authenticity, as I say, and the sense of honor to the game. I mean, let's be honest about it. If you have guys going out, so what? You have 60 beers drunk, you have 80 beers drunk, you have 90 beers drunk. You're talking $90 revenue. I mean, you're not talking about sort of $5,000 a day lost in revenue. This is just quite simply whether they have the the standing to it to be brought to their attention that it shouldn't be allowed, and for them to say, absolutely, let's not allow it. And I think a number of clubs already would never allow it. You'd be ashamed if you were to pull up a can of beer in a number of golf courses. And then maybe part of it is culture. For example, in Ireland, I wouldn't have been aware of it at all. I would never have played a game of golf in Ireland where a beer was pulled out of a bag. I'm sure it does happen now, but in the past, I've never seen it. But I think it's really down to individual golf clubs. Can the PGA take the charge on it? I think they could, but it's not for them to sort of set rules nationally that says, hey, your golf course isn't allowed to serve or allow beer to drinkers. I think it's each golf club. And if I was a member of a golf club at the moment specifically and was a member for 20 years, it would be something I'd be raising in a committee. I'd say, guys, what's our position on this? Because I think it's wrong. And, if the club said, well, we think it's right, then I'd say, well, I think you're undermining the value of golf as a sport.
I think your point on revenue is spot on for the clubs, Enda, but I think when it comes to the PGA Tour, it's a total different...
well, the entertainment piece and the
yes.
audience is different. I agree with that.
And considering that when you go to the PGA Tour, a beer is so overpriced that, it's the price of 2 or 3 beers somewhere else. And, it's very clever, but we've seen at events like the Phoenix Open, fans have no problem paying that money if to get what they want at the tournament, because they want the perfect experience on that day. And to a lot of fans, certainly at that tournament, the perfect experience involves a lot of beer.
But I think, again, it goes to the point that you reference really is how do you police that, as in inverted commas, that if somebody's at the bar and they've had 10 pints, that they say, sorry, we're going to have to take you off the grounds now because, you're in a state of drunkenness that we can't afford to leave you here because of what you might do during the round. It's that management piece. And I think in a number of golf courses, I'm sure at the waste management one, there was an element of the PGA going, guys, we got to manage this. Can we please stop it and have sort of checkpoints or sort of, that people aren't allowed to go out onto the ninth fairway with 2 beers in their hand or whatever. I think the PGA can manage it and keep it within the complex of entertainment. So if you're a little bit woozy, you're in the bar. You're not on the sort of the 16th tee box. But then, of course, you can have conflict where people say, what do you mean by I'm drunk? I'm not drunk. But that's policing.
Yes.
I think the players is much more managing the rules. I don't think you have to police it necessarily. If you quite simply say no alcohol at the golf course, the boys say, oh shit. And I think most guys would say, shame, but they're not going to come off the golf course. They're not going to go back to the car and say, we can't drink a beer. I'm not playing. They're still going to play.
Yes.
Because I do believe they have enough interest in the game to play. It's not the beer that's making them play. It's the beer as an attraction, as part of the buddy part, but it's not the beer that's making them play, I would think.
I also think, go back to the policing thing, sorry, Nate. Particularly the on-course thing, as you said, you're right, it's a completely different thing in the sense of, visibly, you might not be able to go out with a 30-pack of beers in your cart, but there's nothing stopping everyone from putting 4 or 5 cans in their bag beforehand. What are clubs going to do? Check the bags before they go out and play?
The marshal. If the marshal, guys, you were told no alcohol in the course, you're going to have to come off. It's a rule,
Yeah.
That's what the marshal in theory is there for, is to manage etiquette, slow play, etc., respect for the golf course. That's just part of the disciplines. And guys, pull away because you've been told, I'll give you a warning now, next time I'm coming back, I'm escorting you off this course. And it's not pandering to the audience or pandering to the player that says, I'm paying here so I expect to be able to do this. No, it's never happened in the past, and there's no reason why it should be authenticated to happen in the present. But I think it's slack management. It's just quite simply the decorum being allowed to, let them have a beer so there's a bit of an atmosphere. No, it's fucking golf. You don't have a beer in the middle of a tennis match, do you? You don't have a beer in the middle of a football game, do you? You could have. You could have, but you don't because you're focused on the game.
Yeah.
Exactly my point, because you play any other sport, no one drinks in the middle of the match. You'll have water, Gatorade. You're not going to be drinking alcohol.
Yeah. And I think that goes back also to, with the social aspect, is people don't see golf as a sport to a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's
Who are
true.
playing it socially.
Social event.
It's
That's
yeah,
true.
exactly. It's not in their minds. It's not a.
But at tournaments, I feel like the PGA is trying to create an atmosphere like baseball games or soccer games where everyone is drinking and cheering, and I feel like they're trying to replicate that in a golf tournament.
Yeah, I think there's certain tournaments, like, again, I know we keep going back to the Phoenix Open, but it's the exact same. I think what you're saying is 100% right there. At other tournaments, though, I'm not so sure. Particularly the ones where you look at your major championships, that sort of thing. Maybe the Ryder Cup as well. To go back to your point, but apart, I think the major championships and the biggest things, they are golf, and they're everything that golf has stood for. Since the beginning of the game. So, as I said, I understand your point, but even if that was the way they were trying to go, I really don't think it would work in general. In terms of doing it for multiple events.
I don't think it's the PGA promoting this at all. I think part of it is on the property. I don't think, for example, the PGA can't come on and say, well, okay, we're running this tournament, but you're not selling beer here. Because the property would say, well, hold on, guys, you don't own our license here. If we're selling beer, we're selling beer. You can't tell us not to. So I don't think that the PGA are not promoting the consumption of alcohol. It's a consequence of the interest in the sport, number one, and the younger guys possibly using alcohol. Because I think the big difference between golf today and the golf 20 years ago is the average age is 25 for a lot of the top players in the world. Before it was 38. So the younger guys were going, well, I better behave myself here because I got to get to the 38 level and beat them. Whereas at the moment, the 25, 26 years go, woohoo, I just won this tour. I think there's 9 new winners this year already on the tour. So I think the age range of success is lowered, and as a result, the celebration of alcohol is more glorified. I would suggest it's one of the contributing factors.
Very good point.
Because the older players are not doing it. The Justin Johnson or those, they're not sort of acting like that, but the younger ones definitely are. But back to your point on the Ryder Cup, again, slightly different competition, and we talked about that briefly in the last podcast. I can't blame the PGA or the RNI. What is it? RNA. I can't blame them.
Yeah, you got the PGA obviously in the DP World Tour now. Yeah. So yeah,
because I don't believe that their mission is to promote alcohol. I think it's a consequence of the behaviour, but I think they can lock it out, or at least try and shut it down, and they should be doing that. On a totally aside thing, slightly in terms of deviation, and I'll show it to you. I wrote a letter about 8 months ago to the PGA saying, guys, you have a huge responsibility to climate change because you're the biggest sport in the world that uses land mass to play your sport. And I talked about leaf blowers and everything else, that they should be electrified and the cars should be electrified, etc. These are the type of things that the integrity of the association needs to grab hold of, such as alcohol abuse, and say, guys, we can't let our sport be demeaned by abuses of it. And at the moment, alcohol is one way that's been demeaned. And there was a lot of golfers back in the Waste Management were disgusted with what was done after that. They were going, that is just atrocious behaviour. So it wasn't the case that they were all going, let's do it again tomorrow. They were saying, we got to shut this down. But that was a bad example.
Well, guys, before we wrap it up here today, I wanted to ask you guys one final question. I want you guys to name your top 3 favorite players of all time.
That's a tough one. I might need some thinking on that one, Enda.
Well, I might be able to do it easier than you because I don't know as many as you do. I would say definitely Tiger Woods. In terms of what that man has done and what that man hopefully continues to do, one has to respect his dignity. I think he's a very honourable golfer. I think he carries the charisma. And again, depending on how far back you go, but he would definitely be there for me. I would also put Rory there in terms of, I suppose, the Irish heritage piece and his own upbringing. Remember seeing him hitting balls into a washing machine when he was 8 on the Late Late Show in Ireland. You'd remember that, Owen. That whole sort of sense of nostalgia that here comes an Irishman that looks like he can conquer the world of golf, and hopefully he will continue to do it. Then I think I would go to the older, in my day growing up, Christy O'Connor Sr., which my father would have followed, would have been an icon of golf. But he would also have been Jack Nicklaus, Lee Trevino, and Gary Player would have been the golfers that I would have heard a lot about, in the sort of the 60s and the 70s. So I give, Jack Nicklaus, I think, would be my third in terms of you can't but respect what he has achieved in the game. And again, I think the 3 of them, teed off this morning at 8 o'clock, 8:30 was late for the start of the Masters. Just the reverence that they bring to still appear and attend at an event. I just think for me is part of that honour continuing to exist in the different generations, So those would be my 3, I think.
Great picks. I'm gonna go a bit different. I'm gonna really 3 picks you probably didn't think I'd expect me to go. I'm going to say Padraig Harrington. I'm going to say Phil Mickelson. And I'm going to say Ian Poulter. I'm not going to put Tiger in there because in my opinion, Tiger is not a human. I mean, some of the stuff he's done, so I can't even describe him as a player. Harrington simply because, it's just he really, obviously being Irish, I'm always going to have a certain bias towards Harrington, but he really does for me define the 1,000-hour rule, or sorry, the 10,000-hour rule. He's just hits golf shots until his hands bleed and just keeps doing it over and loves every second of it. And it's just the hard work that guy has put in, getting, staying in school for a little bit longer than most, going and getting his accounting degree, and then deciding he wanted to pursue his career on the tour. Just exemplary, in my opinion, to anybody, that's playing college golf and doing stuff like that. It really, I think I heard this thing before, an interview back home between Harrington and McIlroy. And I think the reality is if McIlroy's career was to finish today, we'd say he underachieved with 4 majors. But the reality is we always say Harrington has overachieved with 3 majors all day long. And, we say he's overachieved, but the reality is he deserves everything he's gotten out of the game because he's put so much work in. I think I'm going to say Phil because, to be honest, he's just been involved in some of the best performances on a golf course I've ever seen, particularly last year at Kiwa. I mean, I think I never expected to see a performance like that. Just for a guy, as you actually said before we come on here, Nate, that was quiet for so many years, to get back in contention like that and just, bring it home just the way he did. I mean, really kind of stuck to his long and kind of routine where he took an extra 5-10 seconds over every shot and just played every shot so committedly. It was just amazing to watch, and it showed all the older guys that even though it's a younger game these days, those guys still can more than capable of winning massive golf tournaments. And I'm sure you're thinking Ian Poulter's a weird pick for sure. And to be honest with you, it's not even down to the amazing Ryder Cup elements.
Short-lived world number 1 for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's not even down to the Ryder Cup elements for myself. It's just Ian turned pro off a handicap at 4, went and became an assistant professional at a golf club, and basically told his head professional that he was going to make it on tour, and he just refused to take no for an answer. Worked as hard as anyone. Maybe not as hard as Harrington, but he worked as hard as anyone apart from Harrington. And look what he's done for himself in the game today. It's funny. Poulter is actually he's like a red wine. He's just getting better at age, in my opinion. Certainly his his individual career maybe outside of the Ryder Cup, but I think his career has been absolutely amazing to watch and so inspiring for the generation that they might not have illustrious amateur careers, but he's a prime example of you can still do it regardless of what you've done in the amateur game. Once you turn professional, it's a whole different ball game, and that if you really do put the work in, and particularly the work in the right things, you can get there. So 3 very different and less traditional picks to end up, but I'm going to stick with them.
No, I can understand Harrington why you've gone for him. Definitely, in terms of what he has achieved, and to your point of being the accountant and everything that he's done. Poulter as well, I would agree with you, as in, we would see him as a bit of a showman with regard to his fashion and everything, but he has achieved tremendous success in the game at large and his continuity. And I can understand why you go for Mickelson as well. I mean, those are 3 good picks. But when you were saying at the start, I said he's going to go Harrington. I just thought because he is to be revered as well. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I mean, Harrington is more of a purebred Irishman in my opinion as opposed to Rory, so I've got to stick with him all day long.
What about you, Nate? Who would you go for?
Oh, that's always a tough question for me, but for me, I would go Tiger 1, John Daly 2, and Ben Hogan 3.
I'd love to hear a bit on the John Daly selection.
I think he's one of the best players to have ever lived. It's sad to see that his career ended so quickly and had a downturn due to his personal life, alcohol being the main reason, but he could have been possibly the best golfer to have ever lived. Especially that short little run that he had from the 1995 to 2000. He easily could have beaten Jack's record if he just continued to play golf, in my opinion.
Not so sure about easily. I'm not so sure about that. I don't think any human could easily beat Jack Nicklaus's record.
I mean, everyone would say the same thing with Tiger if the divorce didn't happen, if he never got all those injuries, but, those are
the thing with Tiger is his attempts to break the record isn't over yet, and I think he'd be the first one to tell you that. So
that's true.
It's lovely to talk. I think it's a great question because when we hear some of these we're watching the Golf Channel and everything, and they talk about that, who they're picking for certain tournaments. It's always great to hear that perspective. So, well, how did you end up there? The more that I was saying, how did he end up with those three, or your three, as I both, I think Owen and I were stunned with your second choice. It's all personal. It's all who has affected me the most in terms of my belief and passion for the game, because they instill confidence in me that they're good enough to be able to do it, and you root for them, and that's the nice thing about golf, I suppose. Soccer and other sports, you root for one team, whereas with golf you root for individuals. But it's a great question, and for me, as I say, it goes back to my father years ago, I guess, to who he would talk about when I was a kid. But I think that nostalgia is just lovely. That's the beauty about golf. I just think no matter how old you are, until the day you die, you're a hero in the game, because you play the game until the day you die, literally. And that's a great tradition in the sport.
Well, there you guys have it. Thank you guys for being on this podcast and sharing your thoughts. It's been a pleasure. And tune in next week for the next episode. See you guys next time.